Hi, you're watching Project Management with Joe. Project management is a convoluted mix of operations management, leadership, soft skills, accounting, and legal. Today, we're going to learn about project lifecycle. This is a very complex and involved topic. Together, we're going to break it down piece by piece and try to organize this information in a neat and easy to understand fashion. Let's take a look at our approach to simplifying this complex topic. Today, we're going to cover project lifecycle, its definition and meaning, lifecycle phases, types of project phases. We're also going to talk about how to measure your project success. Then we're going to neatly wrap it up and drive some key points across. I included timestamps in the video description, so if you're interested in a particular topic, feel free to jump around. And now let's take a deep dive into project lifecycle. Project Management Body of Knowledge, also known as PMBOK, defines project lifecycle as a series of phases that a project passes through from its initiation to closure. Just like any other element of project management, lifecycle has to have a definite beginning and an end. It is extremely important to gather feedback early in project inception to give you and your team a realistic start and completion dates. Failing to do so can easily cause your project to run out of money or resources before the completion date. You have the power to equip the team with a realistic schedule and make their jobs much easier. But how do you keep track of everything that needs to happen in the project? It is kind of like eating a large steak. Chop it into small pieces and savor each one at a time. Project lifecycle can easily be thought of as a juicy steak, and each phase can be thought of as a large slice. Each phase is made of one or more tasks. Tasks are specific actions, completion of which inches your project closer and closer toward completion. Arrow here represents the flow of time. Our project starts in the far left corner of the diagram and progresses to the right as the time goes. Phase 1 is followed by Phase 2. Phase 2 is followed by Phase 3. Each phase is complete only when each task is done. This is a highly idealized phase diagram of the project, by the way. More often than not, phases overlap and complex relationships exist between the tasks. So let's talk a little bit more about the types of project lifecycle phases. Project lifecycle, no matter the nature, can be easily split into 4 phases: starting, organizing, performing work, and closing. Starting of the project is a period of time when conceptualization, project charter, and feasibility studies are pulled together. The work itself hasn't started yet. Even the detailed cost estimates are not prepared in the starting phase. This is when the fate of a project is decided. Sometimes time included to develop the need for the project can also be counted toward the starting phase. Here, we can spend anywhere between 10 to 20% of project's life cycle. After the project charter and conceptualization were complete, you get a green light to proceed. Now, the project transitions to the organization phase. In organization phase, roles and responsibilities are established. Detailed cost estimates are produced. Procurement and initial resource acquisition also usually take place in the organization phase. Organization phase can take anywhere between 15 to 25% of project's lifecycle. And just like that, we're already nearing the middle of project lifecycle. Next comes performing the work phase. This is where all action happens. Work is being done. Test articles are built. Foundations are poured. Code is developed and tested. Performing work phase is also characterized by the highest client and stakeholder interactions and highest budgetary expenses. During work, most of your allocated resources will be used. This phase can last anywhere between 50 to 75% of project's life cycle. If you want to save time, it pays to start your closing phase halfway through performing work. Review your list of deliverables and start working on preparing those if possible. The more time you can save now, the more cushion you'll have toward the end of the project where delays cost a lot more. And when all tasks are complete and objectives are achieved, project gradually transitions into the closing phase. In closing phase, final deliverables are transferred over to project customer. Financial reports are finalized and submitted for reviews. Expenses and resources use is minimized. Closing phase brings project to completion. After the closing phase, project is over. This is a good time to quantify and evaluate team's performance, record lessons learned, and rest before the next project. In this diagram, phases are depicted sequentially. Let's take a look at what other kinds of phases can there be in the project. There are three common types of project life cycles: predictive, iterative, and adaptive. A classic example of an adaptive life cycle is waterfall, also known as the waterfall model. This approach is a traditional and linear project management methodology. It is characterized by a sequential flow of project phases, requirements, design, implementation, testing, deployment, and maintenance. Each phase must be completed before moving on to the next, making it rigid and less adaptable to changes. Well suited for projects with well-defined and stable requirements, where changes are costly and not feasible. The iterative approach focuses on breaking the project into smaller, manageable parts or iterations. In each iteration, a subset of features or requirements is developed, tested, and reviewed by stakeholders. After each iteration, improvements and adjustments are made based on feedback, and a new iteration begins. This approach is more flexible and adaptable to changing requirements or uncertain project scopes. Common iterative methodologies include Agile, Scrum, Kanban, where iterative cycles are called sprints or iterations. Adaptive project lifecycle is an approach that emphasizes flexibility, adaptability, and collaboration with stakeholders throughout the project. Requirements are not fixed at the project's outset, but they can evolve as the project progresses. Teams work in short cycles called iterations, typically 2 to 4 weeks, and regularly review and adapt their work based on feedback. Agile methodologies like Scrum and Kanban are very common in adaptive project cycles. Agile principles prioritize customer satisfaction, early delivery of valuable software, and frequent adaptation to changing circumstances. Now, just to draw a parallel between these three methods, let's try to compare them, or just see how they fit among each other. So predictive is also known as waterfall. It works best for well-defined, stable projects with minimal change, sequential, and rigid. Think about construction. Think about organizing a security operation for a music concert. Think about starting a coffee shop. Next method is iterative. It is more suitable for projects where requirements may evolve over time. It delivers functionality and iterations. Now we're talking about something that is kind of built from a template, but can be changed and adapted depending on the particular need. Think about building a mall. Now you got the skeleton, you kind of know what you want to build, but you're not exactly sure how many different shops are going to be there. So as you receive that information, you can tailor the design. And adaptive or agile is highly flexible and adaptable to changing requirements. It pretty much always includes close collaboration of customers and the developers. This is commonly used in software. The choice of project cycle depends on factors such as complexity, stability of requirements, customer involvement, and the organization's culture. In practice, some projects may combine elements of these approaches to create a hybrid project management methodology that best suits their specific needs. As a project manager, you have direct influence over the type of lifecycle that you can implement to attain best performance. As a project manager, you have to keep your finger on the pulse of your project. To better understand how well your project is performing, you should use the following 4 project lifecycle metrics and characteristics. Cost metrics, and things like including total project cost. This metric tracks the overall budget for the project, including expenses related to labor, materials, equipment, overhead, and any unexpected costs. Then you have cost variance, which measures the difference between the actual project cost and the budgeted cost. It's what you plan to spend versus what you've actually spent and wrote down. Positive cost variance means cost savings. Negative cost variance means you're losing money. There's also cost performance index, which is the ratio of earned value, or how much work you've completed, and the actual money that you spent. Cost performance index that's greater than 1 shows that you're being cost efficient. If you're less than 1, you're spending more than what you're getting. Second important metric is staff. This metric evaluates how effectively project team members are being utilized. It helps to identify overworked and underused resources. So you can take a look at your scheduling. And perhaps you're seeing that Group 1 has 3 people, and instead of working scheduled 120 hours a week, they're only involved 80 hours a week, while Group 2 is being exhausted by all the extra work, and they are working 160 hours. So maybe you need to start distributing work between 2 teams, or maybe you need to even revise your project performance plan. A third metric of staff characteristic is team productivity. That is really how many tasks you've completed in the given segment of time. The more things you get done in the time allocated, the more productive your team is. Then there is scope metrics. Things like scope baseline that defines project scope, including its objectives, deliverables, and boundaries. It serves as a reference point throughout the project to assess the changes. You sit down, you write things down, you say these are priority 1, 2, 3. Then you go on to execute it. First task is done, you move on to the second one, but you know from the project charter that this is where you need to go. These are things that you want to achieve, and that's where the project scope baseline is a thing that you would rely on when you're trying to measure how well your team is doing. Another interesting definition about scope is scope creep. That's when a bunch of changes start being added to your project. You started by constructing a little log cabin out in the middle of the woods just because you wanted to go skiing every weekend. And then your wife asks to put in a bathroom in there, so you add that. Your kids are saying, well, it's going to be, really small and cramped. Can we put in a second bedroom? So you add a second bedroom. Next thing you know, you are working on an architectural plan for Trump International Hotel Tower in Waikiki Beach, and no longer just a log cabin. So try avoiding scope creep by clearly defining your scope baseline and really not letting anyone add anything else on top of this project. Make it a scope of another project. Put it into your future plans, but do not let stakeholders continuously increase the scope. Otherwise, nothing is going to get done. There's another interesting metric called scope completion. This metric tracks the progress of deliverables against project's defined scope. It helps ensure that the project stays on track and delivers what was promised. Think of it as a reality check, a field walk. Let's say someone asked you to go build a shed behind a gas station. Well, you walk over there and it's just an empty field. So you build something, they come back and they say, dude, this is not a shed. This is a full-blown garage. What's going on? And that's when you fall back onto the metric of scope completion. You revise, okay, did I really build what I set off to build? If you don't do that, you're risking of delivering something that a customer didn't really ask for, and as a result, spend time, money, and resources, but got nowhere. That is when communication with your stakeholders becomes vital. You have to continuously communicate to stay within project scope. Another interesting metric is risk. It is a whole separate topic, and I promise to make a video about it. But in a project risk, it's really a comprehensive list that says what can go wrong. It includes things like likelihood, impact, and mitigation plans. The risk register is used as a reference where you record all those things, and it should be a part of your project charter. And another interesting risk metric is risk exposure. This metric qualifies potential impact of all identified risks on the project, and it really helps you come up with ways to mitigate those. And then, of course, there is risk response effectiveness that evaluates the success of risk response strategies. So let's say something went down, you're building a code for a fuel sensor for the vehicle. Well, in a testing bay, you had a fire because your testing device caught fire and they ignited the fuel. What was your mitigation strategy? Grab a fire extinguisher, put the fire out. Grab the fire extinguisher off the wall, you extinguish the fire, collect the reports. Did we follow the steps? Yes. Was the procedure previously defined? Yes. That's when you know that your risk management for this project was indeed successful and sufficient. Okay, today you've learned a lot of new terminologies and definitions. Let's wrap up this lecture by reviewing the key takeaways. No matter how big or small, all projects go through a life cycle. These cycles are made of phases. In most cases, phases in a project are sequential. Some may repeat on one or more occasions. Generally, there is a definite beginning and an end. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a project. It would be a cyclical operation. By keeping your communication lines open, you can measure performance of the project using cost, scope, risk, and staff metrics. A good project manager is always aware of the project status. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please subscribe to my channel if you want to learn something new about project management every week. See you in the next video.